What I like about making these home bartender videos is I get to share the things that I've learned about making drinks and serving them with you. But I also get to learn. And this month, in coming up with a theme, ended up being garnishes. And I realized that it's something that I know how to do garnishes, but not maybe as well as I know how to do some other things. And mostly that's because I don't keep a lot of fresh herbs on hand all the time. I don't have a lot of those things that you might use in a bar that you go through so quickly that you don't worry about going bad. I don't have all that on hand, but I do have a lot of things. There are a lot of dried things you can use. There's a lot of fresh things like oranges and lemons and limes that you can buy one or two at a time if that's what you're going through. And so there's still a lot you can do, but there's some fun, fussy technique things that you can do to make garnishes a little more fun. And I wanted to take you through a few of those things and show you some ideas to dress up your cocktails, make them look great, but also some reasons behind some of these things, why you do them, and the kind of the flavors and the elements that they add to your drinks beyond just making them look really good. So I've got this kind of janky setup here that we're gonna give a try, and let's see if maybe we can learn something together this month. All right, let's go. Okay, as you probably guessed from the intro, this is another home bartender video for bartenderatlas.com. And as I always say, Bartender Atlas is a great website that does profiles of bartenders from around the world, and they do other features and book reviews and things like this. They also do great little tips about cocktail making in general, including one that I'm going to share later on in this video. I think the first place to start is with citrus, and we've talked about citrus a little bit before, but just to recap, when you're looking for oranges and lemons, you want firm fruit, and you want it to have big dimples or pores or whatever we're going to call these things. I use one of these Y peelers. I also have an OXO one. I have a few different kinds, but these Y peelers just seem to be the best for me. I think you get the most control. And there's a few things we can do. I'm going to use the orange just because it's a little bigger. You don't want it to have a lot of imperfections, because if you're going to be garnishing the drink with it, then you don't want it to look bad on the drink. The most standard way to garnish a drink is just with a nice peel of that drink. The nice thing about these peelers, if you get a good one, is it doesn't take off a lot of that white pith, which is bitter. You want as little of that as possible. It's kind of fun to try your drinks both with and without the garnish to see how it can change the drink, and try different garnishes. You can even do a lemon and an orange with something like an old-fashioned. And then there's a few things you could do. You can just put the garnish in there, especially if you're making something like a big, bold drink with like a really robust bourbon or something, and it has that kind of rustic look. You've got ice cubes in there. You can just leave your peel like this, and you can put it in your drink along the side. You could just rest it on the side of the glass like that, which looks kind of cool. But you can also make it look a little bit prettier as well. Most basically, you could just kind of cut off the sides and end up with something that at least looks a little more, straight and nice. I would do this after you've squeezed the oils, because you want to get as much of those oils from the drink as you can. You end up with something that's a little more straight, a little nicer. And then you can play around with it even more. Like I said, I'm not sort of an expert in really, really fancy garnishes, but you could cut, let's say, a hole sort of in the middle. So you've got this little slit that goes through, just like that. And then you could cut a little slit there and a little slit there. So you've got your slit there and there. And then you can bring these together, because they're on opposite sides, and kind of tie this to, almost not tie, but kind of fold that together so it holds. And then using the slit that we made, you can put it on your cocktail glass, theoretically. And I think, like anything, these are things that take a bit of practice to play around with, but you can get these nice kind of effects like this, and that looks pretty. And again, it depends on your drink. There's some drinks that don't require a garnish at all. That's totally fine. For the ones that do, for the ones that want that little bit of orange or lemon to add to the flavor, then decide on the drink. Is it very fancy and refined? Is it a bit more rustic and raw? The one other thing I would say is, after you've expressed the oils, I'll show you. We'll do lemon this time. Why not? So after you've expressed those oils onto your drink, when I first started going to bars a lot and getting interested in cocktails, what I saw was bartenders like running that citrus around the entire rim of the glass to get a little bit of extra bit of those oils on the top of the glass. And more I'm seeing people be more judicious with their use of the oils, because you don't want it to overwhelm. It is really nice when you get that hit of it when you're bringing the drink up to your nose, but you don't necessarily want that to be all you're feeling. You want to smell the other elements too. It shouldn't just be the lemon. It shouldn't just be the orange. It should be a mix of those things. What I see more is just like a little bit on the side. You know, if you have a coupe glass or a Nick and Nora glass like this, you can just run it up a little bit up there, maybe a little bit on the side before you drop it into the glass. And the idea there being that you're just getting it on your hands a little bit, you're getting it a little bit in your nose, but it's not overwhelming. So I think one of the themes of this whole video is sort of less is more, right? You want to be there to look nice and to add that aromatic element that hits you in the nose and gets your taste buds going. So I said I learned some things while thinking about this video, and one of them that I learned was that I don't have any cocktail picks. I used to. I'm not really sure what happened to them, so we're going to use a toothpick. But for what I'm going to show you, I would suggest something a little nicer. You can get these nice metal picks, and let's say you're using something like cherries. You know, I really like these. I don't know if I've talked about these before, but I really like these Luxardo maraschino cherries. They're really nice. They're really different from what you normally think about when you're thinking about maraschino cherries. They're I'll show you. They're just so wonderful. You know, they just have this, like, you can see it's just so, you can't see because it's so dark and rich. And so, you know, you could, depending on the drink, again, you could just drop one of these cherries into your cocktail. They taste good on their own just to have a little bite of. Also, these things last forever. Well, not really forever, but you know. You want to do these things in threes, or in odd numbers anyway. You know, you've got one cherry, great. Two cherries, weird. So what you can do, if you had a nice cocktail pick, which like I said, I do not, and put 3 of these cherries on there, you could either drop that right in, or you kind of lay it across, and I was going to say customer, but then your guest can drop it into the drink. I do recommend investing in a better cherry and then doing fun stuff like this. You know, get cocktail picks, stick them in, stick them across. You can do this with different kinds of fruit as well. Okay, we don't want these cherries to go to waste, so I'm going to eat them if I can get them out of here. Delicious. And we can move on to something you're probably familiar with if you ever had a margarita or that kind of a drink, which is rimming your glass. So we have a little shallow plate of salt here, and what you can do is you can cut a lime in half. And again, I think when I started drinking cocktails and seeing this, you know, most people would rim the entire outside of the glass. And more I'm seeing people only rimming like part of the glass or half the glass. And you can just kind of run it along the part of the rim of the glass. You know, you can even do it down the side of the glass a little bit like that, so that you're getting the outside. And so part of it has some lime on it. And then you can just dip that in and you'll see where the lime was sticking to the outside of that glass. And then if somebody's taking a sip and they want some of that salt, they can take that sip, or if they don't, they have the other side. It looks kind of nice. Again, it looks a little bit more rustic and less polished and clean, but you don't have to do it this way. You could just get the edge. You know, you don't have to do this part here. And again, there are different drinks. There's a like a Crusta, which you would do a sugar rim with, or I remember somebody telling me about, you know, you could pour like something like Campari into like on a baking sheet, like in a really thin layer, and put it in the oven on a low heat till it pretty much dehydrates and evaporates, and you're left with this hard layer. And then you can crush that up, and then you have basically this like Campari dust, and then you could rim a glass with that. So you can be really creative with these things and try all kinds of things. But you know, I think it is nice to give your guests choice, and so doing just half of the glass instead of the whole glass is a nice option. Okay, now that we've talked about those things, let's move on to some herbs. And we're gonna do mint, the way you'd put mint in a julep. And so I have this crushed ice here that I put in this cloth Lewis bag and banged up with this muddler. But again, you could use a Ziploc bag and a rolling pin. And so we're gonna put some of this crushed ice into this julep cup. And I also have this ice scoop. And the nice thing about the ice scoop, apart from it just being there to be able to scoop the ice, is that this one isn't quite wide enough for this glass, but if you had a wider one, you would kind of use the shape of that to kind of round off the top of your julep. And if you're making a julep, you want it to be a nice mound. I'm not going to quite do it here just so it's not so messy, but what you want is you want to put some mint in there. It's a mint julep, there's already mint in the drink, but you want to garnish it, you want to make it look really nice. There's a great article on Bartender Atlas called The Mint Trick to keep your mint fresh longer and I will link that in the description so you know how to do that, which I've done here to keep my mint nice and fresh. And so you have this lovely sprig of mint. The way I like to get it in there is you can take a chopstick and you can just kind of make a nice hole, especially when there's also liquid in there. This holds better than it is right now. And then you can stick your mint all the way in there. You do want it kind of just coming out the top. And then you want to put a straw in there as well, which you can do the same thing for, right? You can make yourself a nice channel. And lately I've been using, at home, we've been using these metal reusable washable straws. I'm going to use a plastic straw. The point I want to make with the straw isn't that you should use plastic straws, but you should use a straw that really just comes up just to kind of the top of the glass. You don't want it to be too high, because you kind of want a person who's drinking this drink to kind of get their nose into that mint and smell that mint when they're drinking, because this is a cold drink. Obviously it's got all this ice in it. You're not going to smell a lot of the bourbon and the mint from inside the drink, so you really want that mint to do the works. And so this is a whiskey sour and has a nice frothy top. You could do a bit of an orange zest on there. That's nice, but we've covered orange. So what I want to show is using some bitters. This is Angostura. I have it in a decanter, but you don't have to do this. What I do like about the decanter for this is that the drops are a little smaller, so they're easier to do this with. But there's a couple of reasons you could put Angostura on top. And speaking of things that I'm learning and not great at, I'm not great at this, so hopefully this is going to work. So you want to put a few drops right on top. And it sits nicely on the foam there, so it's pretty. But also you do have egg white on the drink, and especially if it sits a little longer, egg white can have a bit of a smell, and there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't mean it's gone bad, but there is a bit of a smell to it. So having that, having something on top of your sour can help mask that smell. But also these things, if you take a toothpick like this and you just kind of draw through there, you can get these cool little designs. And again, I'm not as good at this as some people are, but it is kind of pretty. It does give you that nice bit of aroma of the bitters, and it's something you can play around with. You could put your drops in different places. You can put them all in one spot and then kind of draw away, like you just kind of stays in here however you draw it, so you can get some cool designs going. I've seen people do some fun stuff with this. Play around with this stuff. I also have this nutmeg here that you can grate onto a drink. You can use like a microplane grater, like one of these, just for giggles. Since I've got it here, why don't we put some nutmeg onto this sour? Might be weird, but if you just dust a little bit of that onto part of the drink, that's also really pretty. Again, not that I would suggest necessarily doing this on a whiskey sour, but it's another thing you can do. So you can do fresh herbs, dried herbs, all kinds of things, and it really just comes back to making sure it goes well with the drink that you're making sure it's not overpowering, taking the time and care to have a nice fruit, a nice bunch of mint that that looks good and smells good, and just taking as much care in the way you finish a drink as you have taken through the entire part of the drink leading up to that point. Everything plays a role in the visual aspect, the way it smells, the way it tastes. That all plays a role into how much you enjoy a drink. That way that you finish the drink, that zest, that whatever, those cherries, whatever you put on top, just shows that you're putting that care into every step of the process, and it signals to that person that you're giving that drink to that you care about the drink, you care about them. Thank you for watching. I hope this was informative. I know it was a lot of things to cover in one video, and I will see you next time. Cheers.